Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Topic today is drug-induced liver injury or hepatotoxicity. The drugs, they are very common cause of liver injury. Rather, every drug which we use therapeutically has the potential to cause liver injury and liver involvement. There is a standard definition of this drug-induced liver injury. The early definition was based on the threshold of elevation of transaminases, either AST, ALT, or both AST, ALT, or bilirubin or alkaline phosphatase, when they were elevated more than 2 times the upper limit of normal. So early definition was very simple, and just elevation 2 times of upper limit of normal for either ALT, AST, bilirubin or alkaline phosphatase was defined as drug-induced liver injury. But later on, this threshold and cutoff value was changed, and now the definition of DILI includes an elevation in ALT or AST of more than 5 times the upper limit of normal and patient is without symptoms, or the elevation in alkaline phosphatase more than 2 times of upper limit normal, or elevation in serum bilirubin 2 times upper limit of normal with any rise in AST or ALT. And the third criteria to make diagnosis of DILI is elevation of ALT and AST less than 5 times the upper limit of normal and patient is symptomatic. So without symptom, the elevation should be 5 times the upper limit of normal, and with symptom, the elevation in ALT and AST level less than 5 times of upper limit normal is the criteria for making diagnosis of the drug-induced liver injury. And for alkaline phosphatase and bilirubin, the elevation is 2 times the upper limit of normal. It is difficult to describe the exact incidence and prevalence because most of the patients are asymptomatic, and most of the time it is biochemical abnormality on which we make a diagnosis of DILI. But the proposed incidence is 1 into 10,000, and it may be 1 into 100,000. The overall mortality and fatality is estimated to be 0.15%, and in Pakistan, these drug-induced liver injuries, they contribute to 1.4% of all the GIT admission in the hospital and 2.5% of all the hepatobiliary admissions. The association of DILI with the drugs, it varies with the geographical regions. In Western countries and throughout the world, the commonest cause of autoimmune drug-induced liver injury is the use of antimicrobials. And along the long list of antimicrobials, the coamoxiclav, the fluloxacin, and some other antibiotics, they are notorious to cause drug-induced liver injuries. And in contrast, in our part of the world, the anti-tuberculosis drugs, they are the commonest cause of drug-induced liver injury. DILI is the leading cause of acute liver failure in the Western world, and out of the drugs, the paracetamol is at the top, and 50% cases of acute liver failure who need transplant, they are because of the overdose of paracetamol. And this list is followed by the antimicrobials, which are at number 2 cause for the acute liver failure. And again in Pakistan, the anti-tuberculosis drugs are the commonest cause of drug-induced acute liver failure in adults and in children, and these drugs, they contribute to 5.7 to 22% of all the causes of acute fulminant liver failure. The presentation of the drug-induced liver injury, it can take several patterns and several forms. and this presentation may vary from asymptomatic presentation, which is often self-limiting, and there is just a mild and transient elevation in the liver biochemistry, or this liver abnormality may be in the form of severe jaundice, and the patient may also have a presentation with severe life-threatening acute liver failure, and sometimes the patient can also have the features of chronic hepatitis and chronic liver disease associated with this drug injury. Many of the asymptomatic elevations which we see in individuals who are exposed to drugs, they may be associated with the phenomenon of adaptation or tolerance. And by this means, a patient, when we start drugs, they will show some elevation, some abnormalities in their liver enzymes, but as we continue the drug, the liver shows adaptation and tolerance, and the liver function tests, they then become normal as we continue with the drugs. And this phenomenon of adaptation and tolerance is seen in approximately 5 to 50% of the subjects taking the drugs. Sometimes the DILI may take a chronic pattern, and by the chronic DILI we means there is failure of return of liver enzymes or serum bilirubin to the normal or pre-DILI baseline, or other signs or symptoms of ongoing liver disease. They persist for more than 6 months after the onset of DILI. So if the abnormalities in the liver enzymes, in the serum bilirubins, or the other signs and symptoms associated with the drugs, they persist for more than 6 months, then we say this DILI has now become a chronic stage. And this chronic drug-induced liver injury occurs in about 15 to 20% cases of acute DILI. So about 1/5 of the patients who suffer from acute liver injuries, they can progress to this stage of chronic because of this drug exposure. And patients who develop this late DILI, they can sometime progress to cirrhosis with all its associated complications, but they are rather very rare with acute DILI. And most of the time patient just persist with mild chronic elevations in the enzymes or mild signs and symptoms. Thus, in one of the studies which was having long follow-up about for 11 years, and of a total of 685 patients who had DILI associated with jaundice, only 8 developed cirrhosis on long-term basis. So progression to cirrhosis is extremely rare with drug-induced liver injuries. But on the other hand, the chronic DILI, it may resemble autoimmune hepatitis, and sometimes it may respond to corticosteroids. And this response to steroids is commonly seen when the serological markers and biopsy findings are suggestive of the diagnosis of autoimmune hepatitis. Thus, in a recent Swedish study of 23 patients who developed chronic drug-induced liver injury, about 23% of these patients were subsequently diagnosed to have autoimmune hepatitis. And the main drugs which were involved in this chronic autoimmune type of DILI were ranitidine, and now ranitidine has been withdrawn from the market because of the side effects, and enalapril, estrogens, carbamazepine, and the osteol. And when we were talking about the withdrawal of the drugs from 1997 to 2016, total 8 drugs they have been withdrawn from the market because of this element of hepatotoxicity. And withdrawal of drug after its marketing are severe restrictions on its use. It has got tremendous economic associations and quite a damaging effect to the pharmaceutical company who has put a lot of money for the research and development of this drug. And one great example is troglitazone, which was one of the glitazones, initial glitazones, and later on only two glitazones they were approved. One was the pioglitazone and rosiglitazone, which was again withdrawn from the market because of cardiovascular side effects. And talking about the association of the drug-induced injury and autoimmune liver disease, we can have 5 types of associations of these two combinations. Number 1 is the autoimmune hepatitis with DD. These patients are the known patients of autoimmune hepatitis, but the autoimmune hepatitis is usually very silent and quiescent, and the drug may be the trigger of the new bout. Or the autoimmune hepatitis is under control with immunosuppressive or with the corticosteroid treatment, and there is reactivation of this known autoimmune hepatitis upon introduction of the new drug, and this is very difficult to demonstrate the causal relationship between the drug and between the reactivation of the autoimmune hepatitis. And often these patients, they have advanced fibrosis on the histopathology. The second association is the drug-induced autoimmune hepatitis. In this category, the patients, they have a low-grade disease which is not diagnosed before, or they have a predisposition to develop autoimmune hepatitis, and the drug produced an immune reactions that leads to the chronic process, and this drug perpetuates the underlying autoimmune hepatitis, and there is permanent need for immunosuppression, and most of these drugs, they have a genetic predisposition to develop autoimmune hepatitis. The third variety of this association is the immune-mediated DILI, the so-called DRESS syndrome, where there is drug-related eosinophilia and signs and symptoms, and there is autoimmune hypersensitivity. These patients, they present with eosinophilia, with fever, with lymphadenopathy and skin rash. And these patients, they are indistinguishable from the true autoimmune hepatitis, and the treatment with immunosuppressive drugs and with corticosteroid is almost essential requirement. It is mandatory to treat these patients with immunosuppressive drugs, and frequently these patients, they show spontaneous remissions after the stopping of the drugs, and usually there is complete response to the treatment, and the subsequent remissions, it is persistent without any relapse. And the fourth association of the drug-induced liver injury with autoimmune hepatitis is the mixed autoimmune type, where the patient have the mixed features of immune-mediated DILI and the drug-induced autoimmune hepatitis. These patients, they again require treatment, and the response to treatment is not very complete, and sometimes the frequent relapses, they will be occurring. And the last association is the DILI with just positive antibodies. These patients, they don't have any typical signs and symptoms, and just they show the biochemical abnormalities in the form of various autoantibodies, which we see in patients with autoimmune hepatitis. In 2002, these two Japanese workers, they published a study, and they studied 64 patients admitted to their hospital with DILI, and they found that out of these 64 patients, 6 were having positive ANA. And very recently, another study from the Spanish Latin American DILI network has published a series of 73 DILI cases, and out of these 73, very high percentage, 29%, they presented with positive autoantibodies, and mainly they were anti-nuclear antibodies. Sometimes the DILI can have a very severe presentations, and this severe form of DILI is defined as presence of ascites, encephalopathy, and an INR of more than 1.5, and this is one of the indication for hospitalizations, and sometimes this may become one of the indications for liver transplant. There may be 3 clinical patterns of drug-induced liver injury, and this classification is based on the level of elevation of the transaminases, ALT, and the elevation of alkaline phosphatase. And on the basis of elevation of these 2 enzymes, we can have 3 different patterns: hepatocellular, mixed, or cholestatic. And how to categorize DILI into these 3 subgroups, and this was first established, this classification, and we calculate the R ratio, and this was first defined by the Council of International Organization of Medical Sciences, and later on this was also modified and accepted by the US FDA. And this scoring system or this classification is based on calculating the R ratio, and the R ratio is calculated first by calculating the ALT activity, and the ALT activity is calculated by dividing the actual value of ALT with the ALT, the upper limit of normal. So the patient ALT is divided by the laboratory set point for the upper limit of normal, and secondly we calculate the alkaline phosphatase activity again by the same manner, by dividing the value of the patient's alkaline phosphatase with the lab value of the upper limit of normal. And after calculating this ALT and the ALP activity, the next step is to get a ratio of this ALT activity divided by the alkaline phosphatase activity. And if the result is more than 5, this indicates hepatocellular injury, and a value less than 2 indicates the cholestatic picture, and the values between 2 to 5, they are indicative of a mixed pattern. And this is the studies from 5 different countries, including Spain, Sweden, USA, Japan, and India. And they were long studies, they were span over several years, and they found the different features associated with the different type of the DILI patterns. And when we come to the features of these different patterns of the DILI, the cholestatic pattern of hepatitis is associated with low mortality as compared to the hepatocellular pattern. The mortality in different figures is variable from 1 to 7.8%, but with most of the hepatocellular type of the involvement, the mortality is around about 10%. This cholestatic pattern has a long and protracted course, and this takes a much longer time for normalization of the liver test. Normally with the ALT and AST elevation, they usually become normal within about 1 to 2 months, but this alkaline phosphatase may take at least 6 months to become normal. And the progression to chronicity in definitely seen with the cholestatic pattern as compared to the hepatocellular pattern. So this was the study which was published by the NRAT, and it showed that the cholestatic or mixed liver disease, they were more prone to develop the chronic injuries, and in that study it was the 9% then compared to the hepatocellular form, where the progression to chronic stage was seen in only 4% of the cases. And this table shows the association of different drugs with different patterns of the drug-induced liver injury. The picture may be in the form of acute hepatitis, where there is elevation of the liver enzymes in the hepatocellular pattern, and the common drugs which are associated with this type of involvement are the antituberculous drugs, the isoniazid, pyrazinamide and rifampicin, the NSAIDs, ibuprofen and nimesulide, cotrimoxazole, phenytoin and dapsone. The cholestatic pattern is commonly seen with the phenothiazines, the chlorpromazines, the comaxiclave, the flucloxacillin, carbamazepine and phenytoin. The autoimmune pattern is commonly seen with minocycline, nitrofurantoin and alpha-methyl-dopa. The picture of fatty accumulation and steatohepatitis is commonly associated with the administration of tamoxifen, amiodarone, tetracyclines and valproic acid. Almost all the anticonvulsant drugs, they are hepatotoxic and they can have a different pattern of liver involvement. The drugs dapsone and sulfonamides, they can have granulomatous hepatitis, association with formation of granulomas in the liver, and cirrhosis is commonly associated with methotrexate, with amiodarone, and sometimes it is also reported with methyl dopa as well. Simple bland cholestasis is commonly seen with the use of anabolic steroids and with danazol. The pattern of nodular regenerative hyperplasia is commonly associated with diadenosine and with the stavudine. And the problem of the duct injury or the vanishing bile duct syndrome is associated with carbamazepine and with the cotrimoxazole. And hepatic adenomas may be associated with the anabolic steroids and with the oral contraceptives. So you can have these different patterns of the liver involvement with different type of drugs. The commonest pattern is the hepatocellular and the cholestatic, but you can have also the other patterns of liver involvement with different drugs. And how these drugs, they cause this liver injury, different mechanisms, and the 5 proposed mechanisms, they include the intrinsic injury, the idiosyncratic injuries, toxicity to the mitochondria, there may be defect in the bile formation or its transportation, and there may be inhibition of the bile salt export pump. So these are 5 proposed mechanisms of liver involvement by the different drugs. The first pattern of involvement is the intrinsic injury. This intrinsic injury is predictable. It is dose dependent hepatotoxicity. So the drugs, they will produce injury to the liver when it is given in very high dose, and majority of the patients who will be receiving this dose, they will get this liver injury. So it is a predictable response and it is dose dependent. And the commonest example of the drug which is associated with this intrinsic type of hepatotoxicity is the paracetamol. Paracetamol is rather the commonest drug in the Western country which is associated with elevated liver enzymes, and it is commonest cause of the acute liver failure, and rather 50% of the cases of acute liver failure in Western countries, they are because of the paracetamol. And most of the time when you take high dose of paracetamol exceeding more than 10 grams, and usually this is suicidal intake, then this is associated with this intrinsic type of liver injury. The smaller doses, less than 4 grams, they may show slight elevation in the liver enzymes, but the severe and permanent damage to the liver is not seen. And commonly, this paracetamol toxicity is associated in those patients who are chronic alcoholics. And there are two mechanisms by which this chronic alcohol intake predisposes to develop the paracetamol toxicity. The paracetamol and the alcohol, they are metabolized by the same enzyme, cytochrome P450 2E1, and the chronic intake of the alcohol will cause induction of this enzyme, and the elevated level of this enzyme, they will be causing more metabolism of paracetamol, and the metabolic product of this paracetamol metabolism is one very important metabolite which is known as N-acetyl quinone imine, or simply NAPQI. And normally this metabolite is handled by the glutathione, but in patients who are taking very large dose of paracetamol, or patients who are alcoholics, this glutathione gets depleted, and then this metabolite gets covalent binding with the mitochondrial proteins, and through further complex mechanisms, then it induces the liver injury. So paracetamol is the commonest example or prototype of the drug which will produce intrinsic, dose dependent and predictable hepatotoxicity. The second pattern is the idiosyncratic. This idiosyncratic injury is host dependent and dose independent. This is unpredictable. Only very few patients, they will show this type of the injury to the drug. Majority of the patients who will be receiving this dose, normal dose of the drug, they won't show any features of involvement. And perhaps the underlying genetic involvement and genetic predispositions and the involvement of the immune system and inflammatory response systems, they are responsible for this idiosyncratic type of the drug-induced liver injury. And normally the drugs themselves or their metabolites, they are not immunogenic, but these metabolites, they can bind with the cellular proteins such as the cytochrome P450 enzymes, and then they get converted into haptens, and these combination of the metabolite with the cellular proteins or haptens then activate the macrophages and the natural killer cells which are resident in the liver microvasculature or in the sinusoidal system, and thus they set in motion the major cascade involving the histocompatibility complex proteins and other cytotoxic proteins and other components of the immune system to set in picture the whole cascade of injury to the liver. So just the comparison of the two types of the liver injury. The intrinsic type of hepatotoxicity, you can produce it in the experimental models. It is dose related, the human incidence is quite high, and it has got a short latency period, usually in days or in hours. And the main drugs, as I said, is paracetamol and phosphorus, and some other drugs may also be responsible. With idiosyncratic type of hepatotoxicity, you can't reproduce it in the experimental models. It is not dose related, it is dose independent, and the human incidence is very low, and only very small number of the patients they will show this type of liver injury, and latency period is usually long, varying from days to months. And the common drugs which are associated with this idiosyncratic type of injury, they are the antituberculous drugs and cotrimoxazole and the anticonvulsants, phenytoin. This idiosyncratic type of involvement can have two further type of presentations. One is the hypersensitivity, and the second one is the metabolic. In the hypersensitive type of idiosyncratic reactions, again the latency period is about 1 to 6 weeks. Again, this is not related to dose, and commonly it is associated with the rash and with the eosinophilia, just like the presentation of the DRESS syndrome, and rechallenge is not possible. And the common drugs which can produce hypersensitive type of idiosyncratic reactions, they include mainly the anticonvulsants. And the metabolic type of idiosyncratic reactions has a long latency period, sometimes very long, up to 52 weeks. It is to some extent dose dependent, and it does not show the feature of the DRESS syndrome. Rechallenging is possible, and the common drugs which are associated with this type of injury, they are the isoniazid and pyrazinamide. The main risk factors which are associated with DILI, they are genetic factors and environmental factors. And the genetic factors may be in the form of polymorphisms of various enzymes and proteins which are involved in drug metabolism and transportations. So, three types of factors, they can influence the overall drug injury by a particular drug. They may be host factors. The age is very important, and most of the drug reactions, they are seen elderly persons, because as the age advances, there are changes in the pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamics of drugs. Most of the time, females, they are more vulnerable to get this DILI. Pregnancy, malnutrition, and the various components of metabolic syndrome, obesity and diabetes mellitus, and various underlying comorbidities, they may be the important host factors associated with drug-induced liver injuries. Out of environmental factors, the consumption of alcohol, smoking, and the infections and various inflammatory episodes, they may be responsible. And the drug-related factors which are associated with the injury, they may be include the amount of the drug which is used, the daily administrations, its metabolic profile, pharmacodynamic and pharmacokinetic properties, the class effects or cross-sensitization with other drugs, and if the patient is receiving number of drugs, then drug interactions, they also may be important for this drug injury. So various risk factors out of these three categories which are associated with commonly used drugs associated with the DILI, they are shown in this table. Like with paracetamol, as we discuss in detail, it is the chronic alcohol use, then fasting and concomitant use of the isoniazid and the phenobarbital, because isoniazid is also metabolized by the same enzyme, cytochrome P450 2E1. With diclofenac, another very commonly used drugs, commonly used NSAIDs, and the associated risk factors, they include the female sex, the underlying osteoarthritis, the cytokine polymorphisms, or mainly association with interleukin 4 and 10. Erythromycin toxicity is mainly seen in the young age. Halothane mainly produces hepatotoxicity in obese persons, and with isoniazid, the underlying comorbidities and presence of infection with hepatitis B virus, C virus, HIV, the alcohol use, the older age, female gender, and combined use with rifampicin and the STO acylations and the genetic polymorphism with cytochrome P452E1, they are the important risk factors with isoniazid. And with methotrexate, chronic alcohol use, obesity, diabetes mellitus, any form of chronic hepatitis and psoriasis. And with sodium valproate, young age, and the use of other antileptic drugs. With proglitazones, the polymorphism in the glutathione, and with flucloxacin, it is the association with HLA B5701. So these are the important risk factors which are associated with hepatotoxicity with commonly used drugs. There is no definite diagnostic test, and it is the diagnosis of exclusion. Once we have ruled out all other possible causes of liver injury, then we make a diagnosis of DILI. So we have to suspect the association and predisposition of any drug to cause liver injury. And how to evaluate the DILI? This is a simple algorithm. Any patient who presents with abnormal liver function test, you take a thorough history and perform thorough physical examinations and review of all the medicines, and especially the food supplements and all the herbal medicines. Most of the time patient will be taking these food supplements, herbal medicines, and they may be responsible for liver injury, and most of the patient, they will just ignore them because they don't take them as drugs. And then you perform the R value to find out what is the pattern of this liver involvement. And as we discussed, on the basis of this R factor, we divide these patients into three categories. The hepatocellular, where the R value is more than 5, and then we perform all the possible tests of hepatocellular involvement like the Warren markers and other possibilities. And similarly with the mixed picture, again we have to find out all possible causes of liver involvement. And with the cholestatic picture, where the R value less than 2, then mostly it is the imaging studies, ultrasound and various other imaging studies, which will be helpful to find out any cause of obstruction or cholestasis. Most of the time the diagnosis can be made on the basis of the clinical suspicions, the biochemical abnormalities, and the other associated signs and symptoms, but sometimes you may need liver biopsy to confirm the diagnosis of DILI. And this liver biopsy, it should be considered in these circumstances. Number one, if autoimmune hepatitis remains a competing etiology, and if immunosuppressive therapy is contemplated, because you have to clear-cut demonstrate the underlying autoimmune hepatitis, and this can only be done with the basis of the liver biopsy, its various types, type 1 and type 2, and then we can start with the immunosuppressive treatment. It may also be considered, this liver biopsy, in the following situations: if there is an unrelenting rise in the liver biochemistries, or the signs and symptoms of the worsening liver functions despite stopping the suspected or offending agent. So if the picture is deteriorating even after stopping the drugs, then we have to perform the liver biopsy to rule out any underlying liver disease. Liver biopsy may also be considered if the peak alanine aminotransferase level has not decreased by more than 50% at 30 to 60 days after the onset in cases of hepatocellular type of DILI, or if the peak alkaline phosphatase has not fallen by more than 50% at 180 days in cases of cholestatic DILI. And this demarcation of the time interval for alkaline phosphatase and alanine aminotransferase is again on the basis that the cholestatic picture is always takes a longer course. So if these enzymes they fail to show a decline at the specified time intervals, then we go for the liver biopsies. Liver biopsy may also be performed in cases of DILI where continued use or re-exposure to the implicated agent is expected. And this liver biopsy may also be performed if liver biochemistry abnormalities they persist beyond 180 days to evaluate for the presence of chronic liver disease and chronic DILI. So if the abnormalities are persisting for more than 6 months, then sometime biopsy may be needed, whether it is underlying chronic liver disease or it is chronic DILI. And there are certain assessment tools which have been developed to assess the severity of the underlying DILI, and the commonly used parameters or casualty assessment methods. One is the so-called RUCAM, and this RUCAM is after the name of the original pharmaceutical, the Russell Alcaf casualty assessment method. And the second one which is commonly used is the MNV, the Maria and Victorino method. And similarly we have this Dillon assessment tool, which is drug induced liver injury network. And similarly there is another assessment tool which was developed by the Digestive Disease Week of Japan, DDW Japan. The RUCAM was established in 1990, and this is also known as the Council for the International Organizations of Medical Sciences. And this RUCAM scoring system, the goal of casualty assessment is to generate a score that reflects the likelihood that a drug accounts for the injury pattern. And this is a very simple method of calculations. This can be used by the non-experts and by the physicians in their solo practice. This RUCAM scoring system is simple, shows better performance, and it is more reliable and more consistent. And when we compare it with the MNV method, the RUCAM was found to be more reliable and correlated better with the other system. And this RUCAM scoring system is based on the scoring with with 7 domains. And this is the list of those domains which we commonly used, these 7 domains. And after the calculation of score, if the score is more than 8, then this shows the patient has high probability of the DILI. The score of 6 to 8 shows probable diagnosis of DILI, and a score of 3 to 5 the possible, with score of 1 to 2 it is unlikely, and any score of 0 or less. Remember, you can have a minus scoring with this RUCAM system, and any score which is less than 0, it is excluding the possibility of DILI. So calculation on the basis of these 7 domains, and then we establish the scores and we set the probability of DILI. And there are certain limitations with these scoring systems, especially if you are using multiple drugs, like we use the antituberculous drugs, then it becomes really difficult which drug is the most possible cause for the injuries. And the second scoring system, which is commonly used, is this Maria and Victorino, and this is based on 6 parameters. The first 2 parameters are the same, but other parameters, they are a bit different. And then we again score out from these 7 parameters, and if the score is more than 7, it is a definite diagnosis of DILI. The score between 14 to 7, it shows the possible, and the score of 10 to 13 again shows a possible diagnosis, and similarly the score of 6 to 9 is unlikely, and any score less than 6 most likely is not associated with DILI. And what about prognosis? In general, the outcome of idiosyncratic DILI, they are usually good, and only 10% they will be reaching the threshold of acute liver failure, presenting with coagulopathy and encephalopathy. And DILI that does evolve to the acute liver failure carries a poor prognosis. And once the patient, they have progressed to acute liver failure, the mortality is 40%. And 40% of the patients, they will be requiring liver transplantations, and 42% will be having the mortality. And advanced common grade and high MELD scoring, the model of end stage liver disease scores, they are associated with bad outcomes. Overall survival is better with intrinsic or the predictable type of the injury which we see with paracetamol as compared to the idiosyncratic cases. The spontaneous survival is 62% as compared to 26%. And the various prognostic scores to predict the outcome for DILI reaching the threshold of acute liver failure are poor or rudimentary. And this Hy's law is very important, and FDA has also adopted this Hy's law as a predictor of severe toxicity during the clinical trials. This law is mainly used to assess the severity of the DILI during the various studies and various clinical trials, and this is based on the observation by this Zimmerman, and it suggests that there is 1 into 10 mortality risk of DILI if the following 3 criteria are met. The serum ALT or AST more than 3 times the upper limit of normal. The serum total bilirubin is elevated to more than 2 times the upper limit of normal and without initial finding of cholestasis. Number 3, there is no other reason can be found to explain the combination of increased aminotransferases and bilirubin, such as viral hepatitis. So in the presence of these 3 categories, the patient shows a very high mortality and morbidity. And how to prevent DILI? Obviously, the rational prescription of the drug is essential to minimize the DILI, particularly in patients who have risk factors such as old age, the associated comorbid conditions, the HIV status, the daily administration of the drug exceeding more than 50 to 100 milligram, or if the patient is having multiple drugs. And second important step is the vigilance for symptoms, and this is the key in the detection of early onset of DILI. The suspected drug should be stopped at the slightest suspicion of the DILI in order to prevent progression to severe liver damage. And in the preventive aspect, re-exposure to a drug that is thought likely to have caused hepatotoxicity is strongly discouraged. So once a drug is suspected to have associated injury, it should not be given again. And especially if the initial liver injury was associated with significant elevation in the aminotransferases, like if the ALT level was more than 5 times the upper limit of normal, our patient is having criteria of Hy's law, our patient is clinically jaundiced, then the re-exposure should not be there. But one important exception to this re-exposure is the recommendation is in cases of life-threatening situations where there is no suitable alternative. And one very common example is the use of antituberculous drugs. So after hepatotoxicity, there are well-defined criteria how to stop these drugs and how to start them again. So the hallmark of treatment of DILI is withdrawal of the drugs, and there are certain other possible interventions or modalities which may be helpful in special cases. The use of N-acetylcysteine, the silymarin, various antioxidants, the use of adenosine, methionine, ursodeoxycholic acids, glucocorticoids are combinations, and then liver transplant. So most of the time we don't have any definite therapies either for the DILI or with DILI and acute liver failure. Most of the treatment remains supportive and monitoring for the development of the acute liver failure. N-acetylcysteine is helpful in patients with paracetamol toxicity, and there are certain also trials where the non-paracetamol DILI injury may also be responding to the administration of the non-acetylcysteine. And similarly, there are different studies recommending the use of glucocorticoids or ursodeoxycholic acid, especially in patients with cholestatic type of liver involvement. And this is the King's College criteria for the liver transplantations in the setting of acute liver failure. And you have the different criteria for the paracetamol and for non-paracetamol etiology of the acute liver failure. So what are the take-home messages from today's presentations? Number one, the drug-induced liver injury due to paracetamol is the leading cause of acute liver failure in the Western countries and second commonest cause in Pakistan and in the subcontinent. Consider the possibility of DILI in patient with unexplained acute and chronic liver injury. So always consider the possibility of drugs as a possible cause of explained or unexplained liver involvement. And spontaneous recovery from the non-paracetamol drug-induced acute liver failure is extremely rare, and early referral for liver transplantation is very important. So these are various references which are used in these presentations, and thank you very much for your